I'm John Bominger, a Senior Principal Consultant at CA Technologies. Today I'm going to talk about how CA's DevTest Service Virtualization technology can be used in an SAP installation. SAP is the leading ERP package used by business today. However, the very breadth of its coverage means that implementing SAP, implementing applications against SAP, and performing SAP upgrades can be a very complicated and very logistically trying operation. Therefore, what we're going to talk about today is how you can use DevTest Service Virtualization to make an SAP operation run much more smoothly. The first case we're going to talk about has to do with simulating an SAP environment if I'm doing application development. So how does that work? Well, imagine that I have an SAP ECC6 or SAP R3 system today. If I want to develop an application against that system, anytime I want to do tests, I have to worry about having that ECC6 or R3 system available. The problem is setting these systems up, keeping them maintained. It can all be a very expensive proposition. So what we do with CA DevTest technology is we will simulate the way the ECC6 or R3 system looks on the network. So this way, an application can be communicating with what looks like an R3 system, but in reality, it doesn't have to actually be an R3 system. So for example, if I'm doing RFC IDOC communication, or if I'm doing some other level of communication, this simulated environment will look the same to me as if it were an actual ECC6 or R3 environment. Another interesting application of this particular use case is for training. Because I can simulate the way an ECC6 or R3 system looks, I could be having end users interacting with an application that works against ECC6 and R3, and then instead of working against a live system, they can work against a simulated system. An advantage of using DevTest for this is that every time a new user connects in, they will end up with a fresh copy of data. It will be reinitialized to the way it should be at the beginning. So rather than having to worry about test data management, instead what I can do is I can just allow every user who connects in to get their own copy of data, and at the same time it won't interact with any of the other users. A next use case that we have with ECC6 and R3 is the case of trying to do a system upgrade. So in this example, I have back-end systems that I need to deal with, such as mainframes, such as corporate databases. And what I'm doing in this case is I'm trying to test SAP against those environments. So this, for example, might be NetWeaver. Again, rather than actually having a mainframe, or rather than actually using the third parties, what I can do in this case is I can create a simulated environment simulating my mainframe, simulating third parties, or simulating my data, so that I can be testing the NetWeaver environment against a simulation of the mainframe or simulation of my corporate data. But the other thing that we can do with CA DevTest is that we can create tests that will drive NetWeaver. So in other words, this will again look like an SAP system, but will in fact be virtualized. So that in this case, I have DevTest driving NetWeaver, and I have DevTest providing a simulated mainframe and simulated corporate data. A fourth use case has to do with preparing SAP for a production rollout. Now the problem in this case is that I might have, for example, my ECC6 system, and what I want to do is I want to drive it with the same levels of user load that I will have in production to make sure that it's going to function properly. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a series of tests using DevTest Service Virtualization so that I can approximate the load that the ECC system is going to have once it gets into production. The last case we're going to talk about has to do with business-to-business transactions using SAP. In this case, you have your own ECC6 system that's going to be communicating with the ECC6 system of your customer or your supplier. Trying to do a SAP to SAP transaction during test mode can be quite trying and quite logistically difficult. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to create a virtual copy of the customer or supplier's ECC6 system. As a result, I can do all the necessary testing, including functional testing and load testing, without actually having to communicate with a third party. This is just a sample of how you can use CA's DevTest Service Virtualization technology to enhance your SAP environment. For more information, contact your local CA Technologies sales representative.